going to go ahead and get started here. I'd like to welcome everybody to our legislative forum. This is the first time we've hosted it at this particular facility, so welcome. This is one of our tech training facilities. I'm glad to have you here this morning. So on behalf of President Newhouse, welcome you. I'm Dan Wingtat, Director for Sustainable Energy Resources and Technologies over at the Esterville campus, and I'd like to welcome you to our legislative forum. So just a couple of rules and engagements before we get started. Obviously, just as we did in Spencer a few minutes ago, we're going to play it Iowa nice. One of the hallmarks of being here in Iowa is that we all get along regardless of what our opinions are, so hopefully we'll have a productive discussion this morning. We'll start with some opening comments from our legislators, and if anyone has a question, just raise your hand, and if you would just introduce yourself and try to limit your comments and questions. Just keep it condensed and keep it to about a minute or two so we can have enough time and enough room for everybody to get their comments out there and ask their questions, and then give the legislators time to respond. So we'll start with some opening remarks from Representative Jones.
Sure. So thank you all for being here. Good morning. It's been an exciting, I think, 5 weeks now we've been in session. Since this is our first legislative forum here in Spirit Lake, I do want to kind of go over what the average week looks like for us, because a lot of people ask me questions like, what is it? What do you do? When do you go to Des Moines? When do you come back? Those kind of things. And I think a lot of people think that, we live in Des Moines, and Zach's in a little bit different situation than me, but for the most part, legislators drive in on Monday mornings. We gavel in at 1 o'clock, so if you leave early enough, you can get some meetings in between your drive and when we gavel in. And then shortly thereafter, we'll probably go to caucus or committee meetings. And right now we're in the time during session where we have a lot of subcommittee meetings and a lot of committee meetings. And then mornings, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have budget subs or oversight committee meetings. And then in the afternoons, that's when our policy committees meet. So education, local government, judiciary, veterans affairs, those kinds of committees will be meeting. Ways and Means will meet. Ways and Means Appropriations will meet kind of intermittently throughout those times, and then Thursday afternoons they send us home. Fridays it gives us an opportunity to meet with folks back home, try to catch up on everything from the days that we've missed. John has an outside job. Zach and I are stay-at-home parents, so we kind of have our responsibilities. We're the ones doing the grocery shopping and all those glamorous tasks on Fridays, but so those who do have employment, otherwise formal employment outside, can catch up there. And then Saturdays we usually have forums. Sundays it gives you time to maybe get to church, maybe get to a few pancake breakfasts before you pack, load up the car, and head out again on Monday. So it is kind of a whirlwind of a week that we kind of go through for the next 4 months. But it just is what it is. It's just a different lifestyle, and we just kind of power through. So this next week is funnel week, so what that means is that the number of bills that are eligible for debate, if they don't make it out of a committee next week, then they're dead. And so that really cuts off the, kind of noisy bills that are kind of being talked about that maybe were just introduced to make a point, maybe just introduced to catch some attention in the media, but aren't really going anywhere. So we'll get a better framework for the remaining part of session this next week. And then I'll turn it over to you guys and maybe talk about some of the bills and things that we're working on.
Yeah, sorry, I just was looking up one thing. So for those that were in Spencer, I'll kind of have my opening comments mirror that, so hopefully it won't be too boring for you, but I thought they were pretty good. So we did just wrap up week 5, though there's copies of my newsletter back there if you saw that or got that in your email. I was sick for all of week 4. I had the flu's nasty cousin, and it was pretty rough. It's been going around our family. I'm back to 100%. I'm not contagious, so everyone should be good. The other funny thing was I had for being out a week, I thought, well, I should probably clean up my beard, and so I got my trimmer out, put the setting on that was too short. Took a swipe, and there was nothing there except for skin. So I had to shave my beard, but I left a mustache for 2 days, and my colleagues affectionately referred to it as Young Terry Branstead, and so we had a good laugh out of that for a couple days. And as I mentioned, next week is funnel week, and so bills have to get out of committee except for appropriations, ways and means, and government oversight. Otherwise, they can't advance. We've done some interesting bills. I've written about them in some of my past newsletters, but I just thought I'd mention them to you guys. One of the bills I did was it's called Dead Means Dead. And there was a guy that was sentenced to murder and a life sentence in the late 90s who had a kidney condition and ended up dying. But he was resuscitated and brought back to life. And so he brought a case to say, well, I've served my life sentence, you should let me out of jail. And the court said no, that's not what the legislature intended. So we did a bill to just clarify that no, that's not what we intended. You, regardless of any life-sustaining procedures, you will serve your life sentence until you die. Representative Jones and I serve on the Administrative Rules Review Committee that she chairs. We had a rule come through about when it is appropriate to get a permit to dig up the cremated remains of a family member and take them with you to put on the mantle or whatever it is. And we had some concerns with those rules, so we put a delay on it and asked them to come forward with a bill to fix that, and I think we've done that. So it's kind of an interesting bill. And then another one that we did was the mobile barber bill, and that was a bill where a guy wanted to cut hair in a van. So we did that last year. We passed out of subcommittee, didn't get out of committee. As we've learned since then, there's a lot more to that story. The gentleman's name is William Burt, and he's from the Waterloo area. The governor, he's a felon, and the governor restored his voting rights, and he had this great idea from what he had picked up in prison, cutting hair. And so he wanted to take a barbershop mobily to tap into some underserved communities, veterans and shut-ins and the like. But under Iowa law, that's illegal. It has to be a fixed location. So we did a bill to allow a mobile barbershop, and he's already got it all built out. I toured it a couple weeks ago. It's like a mini school bus without any seats in there, 2 seats to get your work done and rinse your hair off. So really neat idea. I hope we can get that one over the finish line and to the governor's desk. So just a taste of some of the interesting variety of things that we look at. And I said this in my closing comments in Spencer, and I'll say it in my opening comments here. For as much as I prepare for these things, generally speaking, the questions you ask are things that I have not prepared for. So it's a credit to you guys for having some interesting ideas and thoughts and questions about things. So thanks for coming, and look forward to hearing what those questions are.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. This is a great crowd for Spirit Lake, and thanks to ILCC for hosting, ILCC Student Senate for hosting today. This is a great spot to have it. You get to see a little bit about what the community college system does for the state of Iowa, some of the equipment that they have. They have really some tremendous and good things. I know that over at Esterville, the technology, the CERT building, has some of the most unbelievable stuff. They have a whole model windmill. It's actually a working turbine inside of the building. It's amazing to see some of our community colleges and what they have to offer. What I want to talk about is something that I've worked on probably 15 or 20 meetings over the summer this last year, is in the governor's plans she just released last week called Invest in Iowa. And part of that, the main part that I worked on, is the Iowa Water and Land Legacy, the I Will part of it, the 3/8 of a cent of 1 penny. The governor's plan is to raise sales tax by 1 penny. I worked a lot on the 3/8 of a cent of that plan, and so I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. But that's a big bill. It's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of issues arise from it. It deals with mental health. It deals with a lot of different things. But another part that it deals with is workforce development. So in that bill, the main part of that for workforce development is child care. Something that we definitely need in the state of Iowa is additional child care. Here in Dickinson County, we're like 390 vacant or needed child care seats. We don't have enough child care in the county to the tune of 390 child care seats, beds, places that we could use. Workforce housing is another issue that we've got to deal with. And last year we increased workforce housing tax credits by $5 million because it had been, some people would say it was underfunded, but there was $5 million in it last year. Last year we increased it to $10 million. That money's gone. It just got soaked up. People want, especially in rural Iowa, want to build workforce housing. And so we need to have more of that because to be quite frank, With 2.4% unemployment, we need workers. We need domestic immigration into the state of Iowa. Broadband support, if we want to really improve the entire state of Iowa, we need to have high-speed internet. We need to have every area, every section of our state have high-speed internet, because that's what the new businesses that are coming here to the state really want and really will thrive on. And so broadband internet. All of that mix, I think another portion that is in the governor's plan, Invest Iowa, is tax reform, additional tax reform. 2 years ago, we did a tax reform that will really affect and impact the state of Iowa. The governor's plan, Invest in Iowa, increases that tax reform and will reduce our overall income tax from around 9% down to 5.5%, which would be a huge boost to our state, because right now we're just not competitive in the nation as far as income tax is concerned. You can look at across the nation, states that have lower income tax are seeing people vote with their feet and move into the state. States that have higher income tax, you're seeing they're voting with their feet and moving out of those states. New York is a perfect example. Over 1 million people have left New York. Over 1 million people have moved into Texas, which doesn't have an income tax. I'm not saying that we need to get to no income tax. I'm saying we need to get ourselves more competitive. Right now, we're 42nd in the nation. The governor's plan, if it is implemented, we would be down to 20th in the nation on income tax, and I think that makes us much more competitive. K through 12 education funding, the House sent a plan over to the Senate this last week before the 30 days was up. That would provide another let me make sure I get the right, $108 million of new money to K through 12 education. $108 million of new money. Right now, that would be a tremendous boost, I think, to our K through 12 education. And then the last thing, I see a lot of you here who were at the caucus, probably some that were at the Democrat caucus, and I had a blast at the caucus. I thought it was a great caucus, and there's a lot of questions. There was a nice question down in Spencer about the caucus, and I just wanted to bring it up because it's a hot topic in Iowa right now, and we really should be proud of the way that our state conducted its caucus and how both parties were very involved. And I love the caucus. I love getting together. I love to be there and the excitement and everything that goes along with it. But I'm really interested to hear your questions and hear what you have to say. And like the previous two, we're always surprised by some of the questions. So bring it on, and let's hear what you have to say.
Okay, so we will have a little bit of organization to this. We do have 3 topics that were put on the sign-in list, so we're going to start with Erin Reed, who has the topic of Right to Life.
Morning. I'm going to ask you something different today. The Right to Life bill that you guys have about our right to die, actually, when it comes to terminally ill patients, they have 6 months left to live. I'm just wondering where you guys stand on it. When my grandmother got esophageal cancer a number of years ago, it wasn't the cancer that killed her, it was the fact that she could no longer swallow, couldn't eat, and we watched her starve and die from dehydration. And I just don't think there's mercy in that. When our pet dog fell ill, my husband wasn't around, it was our family pet, but it was his dog. And I had to make that decision on my own, and I knew it was the right decision. It was hard, but I knew it was the right decision that I needed to take her in and take care of her because she was suffering. So I'm hoping that you find the mercy in that for our loved ones, because I really don't know anybody that says, please make me suffer as long as possible when I'm dying.
I'll go first. You really threw me for a loop because I wanted to talk about trails with you, but
Well, you can elaborate a little bit more on the ones that sales tax and how the...
if we all use the trails, we'll live a happy, healthy life.
That's right, I agree.
I campaigned, and I believe firmly, I respect life. I respect life from conception all the way to a natural death. And my dad, I'll use this as an example. My dad, at the end of his life, he kept saying, I just want to die. I am no good. He had both of his legs amputated. I just want to die. I'm no good to anybody. And he was depressed, and he didn't want to be around. I'm a firm believer. I respect life, and I believe that we need to all respect life. I don't necessarily agree to equate a dog to a human, because I believe that the human has a soul, and a human life is much more precious than anything else. And I'm just telling you my personal views, and I understand you've got a view as well, and so I respect that. But I do not think that a human can be equated to a dog, and I respect human life from conception to a natural death.
I haven't read the bill, but I know what right to die bills generally do, and I would echo a lot of Representative Will's concerns. I think it's a dangerous precedent to put the control of ending one's life in the hands of another person, and I'm troubled that can be opened up to abuse. I have no interest in people suffering either, and if we can find medications, and we've targeted, for example, in some of the cannabis conversations that we've had about that it could have an impact on and benefit to people in end of life situations. Also, right to try bills or legislation that would essentially allow people to use medication in end of life situations where it may not be what it's FDA approved for, but it may have some benefits. That's the big thing for me. The slippery slope is it's dangerous, and I think it's just far too open to possibly being abused. To put the control over ending somebody's life in the hands of somebody else, notwithstanding the concerns that you raised about the pain and suffering that someone had gone through.
So I take a little bit different stance on this, and I think my views on this have kind of evolved over time. I think we're at a point with our medical capabilities that we can permit someone to die a honorable death, and to not force them to suffer or be out of their wits, or force them to be just I think at some point your soul is already gone and you've moved on, you are seeing other things, your body just won't keep up. And I don't see the value in forcing that pain, that suffering on someone. So I guess I'm open to this. I do, like Senator Whiting alluded to, there are a lot of questions here though, because at this point in someone's life, we have to make sure that they are of sound mind and body, right? So are they capable of making this decision? Do they have a power of attorney? Do they have medical power of attorney? Can that person make those decisions? Is that person benefiting from that person passing away? So are they an heir to a huge estate? Some of those really awful, gross questions are also things that we need to be asking here. We have a do not resuscitate order as an option for people, and so maybe that is something that further down, once we kind of massage this issue a little more, that we could make this an option or have this available to people to clear ahead of time, or designate someone as the person to decide. Additionally, I think medical professionals need to be engaged in that, because has someone really reached that point? I think doctors probably know that answer. So I am pro-life with the rest of them, but at the same time, when someone's lived their life to the fullest, let's let them pass with a little bit of dignity.
Mary, do you have a follow-up question?
I just want to clarify, and I don't compare human life to dogs' lives. It's just that we showed that kind of compassion. I think humans deserve that kind of compassion. And I definitely agree that the patient needs to be in sound mind and have the ability to participate in that decision, obviously, when they know that this is the end road.
And I would like to just say, I agree. We can keep people very safe, very comfortable. I agree that we should allow people, they've got 6 months to live, let them try anything that they can that will make them more comfortable, extend their life. You know, I think we've got too many rules. If somebody's going to pass away, why not let them try something that may even be crazy? You know, we may not even think, well, that's not going to do anything. Well, what is it going to hurt? They're going to die anyway. So I think we've got too many rules, and we need to loosen those things up and understand that it may actually do good. It may not help that particular person, but we can still get good out of that. But we need to make sure that our fellow humans remain comfortable, as pain-free as possible, and be compassionate in that way. I just don't believe that we have to value human life at every stage and in every circumstance. If we don't, drastic things can happen, and we've seen that throughout human history.
Okay, so Dreesen, a comment on mental health funding?
I'm Dan Dreesen. It's just mostly, I'm just curious, I know you guys are bombarded with it constantly. Are you trying to do anything in particular to kind of a guaranteed funding for mental health so it can kind of move away from property taxes?
John, you're playing.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I worked with the governor's Invest Iowa bill throughout the summer, and one of her keystone portions of the Invest Iowa bill is to replace 70% of the county's property tax funding for mental health and allow the county to still have $12.50 per capita to be funded through the county still. So 30% would be funded by the county. The state would pick up with part of that penny of increase in sales tax, would pick up that remaining mental health funding. I agree that we need to move away from property tax funding. I don't know that in our caucus. We've had several discussions about the Invest in Iowa bill, and I don't know that we can get there in the Iowa House. You can tell me if you agree. It's going to be a tough row to hoe, but maybe there's another option or another route to go. But we do need to take that burden off of county supervisors, I believe, and I think the two supervisors here would agree that the funding mechanism just isn't sustainable, just isn't workable, and we need to find a route that is. Megan, you come up with the statistic for other states or
It's a
something?
handful of states. I mean, I suspect some have changed since I heard that statistic, but I mean, it's about 4 states pay for mental health services on county level. So it's probably time that we look at what other states are doing and see if we really have the best model.
Yeah. So it's not a good business model if other states aren't doing it. If only 4 of them are doing it, it probably doesn't work right, and it isn't working in our state. And so we need to really look at that. And I've said for years now that mental health is a crisis in the state of Iowa, and happily we've addressed it 2 years ago with adult mental health, last year with children mental health. We're not finished yet, but we're getting there. And so I don't know if I've given you a good answer. The answer is yes, and maybe yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We're looking at it, talking about it, and I think they touched on so many of those points. There's a discussion, is our property tax is the most appropriate way to go forward and fund it, and so I think it's a good conversation to have. One of the issues that I've heard from other county supervisors is you look at sort of the sustainability of the funding, and so if the economy's not as good, people aren't spending as much money, maybe not as much goes into the sales tax piece. So then how do you make up that difference? And like a floating levy is probably a little scary of an idea for some people, because like we say, okay, well, the levy will adjust automatically, and then people will come to their county supervisor and say, why the hell did my property taxes go up? And so, but I want to make it workable. This is something that happened before my time in the legislature, but as I understand it, a framework was tried to build to address adult and now children's mental health, and now the task is to fund it. I've heard some complaints that maybe we should front the money and then build the infrastructure. I don't know, as a matter of policy, what the right way to go with that is, but this is where we're at, and I think that raising the sales tax, which would fund I will first, and can shift some of the burden off of counties and off of property taxpayers. I think that seems to be a smart solution, but as I went down to ISAC meeting a couple weeks ago before I came down with the flu, and that's what everyone at the table wanted to talk about as the big issue. And so how we tackle it and getting the county's input is critical because it needs to be workable. We can't just do something for the sake of doing it. We got to make sure that it's workable.
So something that Senator Whiting just said is very, very pertinent, and I should have said it, but so property tax can fluctuate with values of property. Supervisors have to raise it or lower it based on property values. It's not a very stable source of funding. Income tax, same thing. As the economy fluctuates, income tax in the state of Iowa does the same thing. Sales tax, on the other hand, is very stable, and it tends to generally just keep on going. It keeps on going up. As inflation goes up, so does sales tax. And so it's a very stable source of funding. And so I think that's really one of the reasons that I favor a sales tax actually stepping in and funding mental health, is because of that stability and the ability for it to be inflationary. And as inflation happens, so does the sales tax.
And to kind of run off of that, mental health is an issue for everyone. This is a community issue. To put that whole issue on the backs of property taxpayers is probably disingenuous. I mean, this is something that we should all be contributing to. This is something that everyone should have some skin in the game. Not everybody owns property, but you know what? Everybody probably does buy something here and there. So I think from a conceptual standpoint and from the viewpoint of how do we really value our mental health services, like, let's all add to let's all be a part of the solution.
Okay, any follow-on on that?
I have a follow-up or question on that. If the money does come from property taxes, the counties, how does that correlate with the 2% cap that was passed last year? Are we going to run into an issue where we're going to be at that cap pretty quickly if the counties are funding through property tax?
Well, right now, the levy for mental health is actually maxed out. You guys are at the max right now, right? 34? 43. So we're already at the max. They can't go any higher on the mental health levy. If the governor's bill Invest in Iowa actually were to come through, then that would drop down to 12.5. Whether you're going to see an actual property tax decrease because of that or not, that'll be up to the supervisors. They could just shift that outside of that 2%. But I guess idealistically, we'd think that it would drop.
I don't believe that's included in the 2% cap.
It's not? Okay.
I don't believe that. I think the status alone 2% cap was excluded.
All right, good.
And Representative Wills, this issue is only going to get solved if the people who are interested in it would all come around a table and visit. We do not have, this is such a big issue, I don't think it can be tackled in one legislative session, nor do I think it should just be a legislative solution. There needs to be some background work here done by the people who are interested in this issue. And they just need to work together. I think that's essentially how the master matrix came to be, was that people just put down their hatred and their anger and they got to work. And so I think that's the best way to resolve this issue. I will say the gotcha photographs and schemes, those aren't helpful. They are absolutely 100% not helpful. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go right to the Warren Register. I think that was today's register, so you can check that out. But it was a really unfortunate situation and was not helpful to this issue at all.
I would just add, so many times we hear about the smell is bad, but smell only travels a certain distance. And, from right where we're at, which is kind of the area that you're talking about, there's not a confined feeding operation. The closest one is west of Milford from here. I don't know that you're going to smell that. Maybe you will if the conditions are just perfect and it's keeping that scent low to the ground. So I would question if that's what you were smelling, or if there was something else that's there. But that is just one confined feeding operation. Other than that, you got to go a long ways before you're smelling or seeing a confined feeding operation in Dickinson County. And so I just want to make sure that
when you drive to Esterville, just as you get
With-
right at the corner there.
and with the
just on
prevailing
the
winds,
side.
and I'm
So
not
that's
disagreeing.
fine. I just wanted to know.
With the
how you
prevailing
felt
winds-
About the moratorium, and you've answered
With the
that.
prevailing winds, the winds go northwest, northeast, west to east, south to north. That's the way the prevailing winds. Every once in a while, we'll get an east or a northeast wind coming towards us. Now then, maybe you could smell something because there's some superior confined feeding operations. But other than that, we're relatively isolated here in Dickinson County, right here where we're at.
Good discussion. So those were the identified topics that we had, so if there are any other questions, we'll take those one at a time. And again, I would just ask that you identify yourself and let us know what the topic is.
Jason Harrington, I'm the president of Lakes Regional Healthcare. I had a question for all three of you in terms of tort reform and whether you saw any ability for movement on that. I will tell you it's a significant issue for malpractice and recruitment of physicians in Iowa. OB units, half the hospitals in Iowa deliver babies today. That number used to be 75%. I think 28 hospitals have closed their OB units in the last 10 years. Esterville most recently, locally, in the last year and a half. So, it would seem to me that within the current ability, there's economic damages, there's punitive damages, there's ways within those two things to punish bad hospitals and bad doctors. And in Iowa, not having a cap on non-economic damages has been hurtful in terms of providing access to healthcare in Iowa. So I'm curious as to your feelings about that and then your thoughts about the success of some sort of non-economic cap.
Well, I'll take that one because it's been kind of a hot topic in the House, and I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and for some reason I've kind of been targeted as the one to go after on this. So this issue is really, really awful. We passed tort reform in 2017, and we have yet to see a case decided under the 2017 law. Fun fact, folks aren't telling you that. In 2017, we put a soft cap on. We have not seen that tested in court. All I can get from the advocates is that there is a case in the works that would be decided under this issue. So that was 3 years ago. These cases take about 5 years to really surface. Medical malpractice is a very, very complicated area of law, and you need a lawyer to litigate it, but you also need one who fully understands medical issues. And so there are very few medical malpractice lawyers in the state who will even take these cases. And I've heard from a lot of people that say, I had this really horrific thing happen to me and I couldn't even find a lawyer to take my case. Because there's a lot of money invested in this and they work on contingency. So if you've all heard the commercials, if you don't get paid until we do, that's exactly right. So they could invest 5 years of their lives on this, and then if there's no case, if the case is tossed, then that time and money is all gone. So that's just some kind of background. Now, the Washington County case, let's go there. The OB ward was closed because of a medical malpractice case. Not true. 2 years before that case was filed, there was an article that said the OB ward in Washington County was going to be closed. So I think a lot of them are closing because they're not having babies. We need more people to have more babies, and guess what? Our state is just generally getting older. Washington County, they turned their OB ward into a geriatric ward. Well, so that just a sign of the times, I think. So what this issue comes down to is how much do you put on a life? Okay, so they've got these 7 or 10 cases that the advocates will continue to shove in our faces. Okay, so gentleman, I think he was from Ames. He was intubated, and rather than put the feeding tube into his stomach, they put it into his lungs. okay? He suffocated over 2 days while his family sat there and watched. Pretty sad situation, huh? So under this bill, his life, his family would get $250,000. Okay, so let's talk about the case out of the Iowa Clinic in West Des Moines. Man was told he had prostate cancer. Took the test, was told he had prostate cancer, went in for surgery, they removed his prostate. Then they said, oh, you didn't have prostate cancer at all. Under this bill, that life-changing accident would be worth $250,000. The mom, there was a mom of 4, went in for a routine MRI. They put the dye in you, you know? She's allergic to the dye. So I'm not a physician, but I know that EpiPens help with allergic reactions. So that would be I would think, the number one thing to go to. They gave her a little bit of Benadryl. She suffered and died from an allergic reaction in the hospital. She's married and has 4 kids. Under this bill, $250,000. She will never help her kids get ready for school ever again. She will never again be at her kids' wedding. She's gone. $250,000, that bill is offensive. I can buy into the fact of a hard cap. I can. I get it. I get you need doctors. I get that. But to say for the advocates for this to put forward a bill that says $250, that little baby in Washington County, that little child who has no economic damages, because we don't know if that baby, what their wages are going to be. We don't know if they're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, if they're going to be Bill Gates, or if we don't know. We don't know what that little baby's worth. So they're not going to have economic damages there. I mean, they'll have medical costs and things like that. But like when it comes to lost wages, that's not there for that little baby. That baby's life is worth $250,000. So I can buy into a cap. I can. But that bill was wrong from the get-go. $250,000, that was cruel. That was not very nice at all.
Yeah, just to clarify, I wouldn't be supportive of that bill. My question was more general than that.
Okay.
So,
I appreciate that because
yeah.
I could not believe that someone would have thought that was the number.
So I'm targeted on this bill, but for a different reason, because I'm the floor manager of the bill in the Senate. And we'll have a subcommittee on this on Monday to talk about it. And I'm interested to hear more about it because, as I understand, this is something that preceded my time in the legislature. The $250,000 number is, as I'm reading the bill, is what's in code right now. There is a comma unless. And
It's a soft cap.
Right, the soft cap. Okay. And so essentially this bill strikes the soft cap. So the legislature at least made some determination that $250,000 was some line at some point, comma, unless. So the question then is, where do you draw the line on the cap? Maybe it's not 250, maybe it's 500, maybe it's 750. We don't know. And Representative Jones made a good point: is how do you put a value on this sort of stuff? So the economic damages piece, that's covered. Lost wages and all those sorts of things. That's not capped. And we're in the business of drawing lines. And so this in the code right now, 250 comma unless, 250,000 comma unless. Would 250 million in any one of those cases be just? Maybe for the family affected, but certainly not for the doctor, the hospital, the healthcare provider. And so as we look to find justice in these things, we're looking at two sides: the people that are injured and the people that are negligent for that injury. We've seen cases like oil spill cases and stuff like that where, don't quote me on this exact number, but like some absurdly in the high billions of dollars, of punitive damages for spilling oil. And it's like some astronomical number that, who knows if they could even pay it. Does that achieve the justice that you're looking for in trying to deter this sort of thing? So what I'm using this meeting and this opportunity to do is take a look at what the code is. Is 250 good? Is this language, comma, unless afterwards, is that worth keeping? Is that worth changing? How do we fix that? So that's the approach that I take from it. But just as a general matter to your sort of broader question about tort reform, generally speaking, I'm generally supportive of finding ways to do tort reform. And one of the other concerns that pings in my mind is that, medical malpractice is a very niche industry. When I was in college in Florida, there was a guy that always advertised himself the MD-JD because he went to medical school and to law school. He's a doctor, but he doesn't practice as a physician. He's a lawyer, and so that's the kind of expertise you want. But if we don't have a lot of in-state lawyers that are taking these cases, and we have out-of-state lawyers taking the cases, and this is what the whole issue comes up in tort reform is: do we want out-of-state lawyers coming in, and is there justice in 40% of those the punitive damages that should go to the person who's, and I don't remember which county you said, the person whose feeding tube got put in their lungs instead of their stomach? Is it just that 30-40% of that goes to an out-of-state trial lawyer and not to the family? That's another question of justice. I have a lot to learn, and I imagine I'll learn a lot on Monday. And I imagine that it will be a spirited discussion, because as I understand the history of it, there's a deal of disagreement between the House and the Senate on this issue dating back even a couple years. And so I think that's where the sticking point will be.
I'm in favor of tort reform, and here's why. This is just one case. We have a lawyer coming into Iowa from California. I understand he's an Iowan, moved back to Iowa, and he realizes that if I ask for a lot, I'll get a lot back. So he asked for $60 million settlement on the death of somebody. I don't know the background of who, it doesn't even matter. It is just a lawsuit, asked for $60 million, got a settlement of $30 million. Now that'll go to appeals, and that's probably too much. It's not going to be settled in the end at $30 million. But guess who pays that $30 million? The doctor's got insurance for it, but that insurance is going to be spread out over higher premiums and higher fees. The doctor's going to charge higher fees. The hospital will charge higher fees. That will be spread out over everybody. I am convinced that not a single doctor, not a single nurse, not a single healthcare professional gets in the practice, gets in the business of taking care of people with the idea that they're going to hurt somebody, or that they're going to, using some of Representative Jones' examples, put a feeding tube the wrong way into a person's body and kill them. They don't do that. They're not getting into the business. It's accidents. Now, and accidents are accidents. How many of you have had an accident? Don't raise your hand, but how many of you have had an accident? We've all had accidents. We've all made mistakes. What's happening is we've got lawyers, and I'm sorry for the two lawyers sitting up here. We've got lawyers in this country, in this area, who are really taking advantage of a bad situation and making it worse. And so $250,000, that's wrong. Megan said it to me one time when we were talking about this. $250 for a baby, that's a disgrace, right? Absolutely. $250,000, that could be the next nuclear physicist that would solve the world's energy problems, whatever it could have been. But $250,000, that's too little. $30 million is a bit too much. Even to ask for $60 million, that's way out of range of even the greatest possibility of what somebody should be paid. But they're asking for it because they can. And so what we really do is we need to set a limit. And I don't know, I'd rather set a limit that can go up as time passes, so that we don't have to go back every 5 years and redo this. I don't know, $5 million, we're really gonna have to have some really in-depth discussions at the State House, Senate, House, even within the House Republicans, and determine where's that going to be and how do we best do it. But really, we've got to have limits. If we don't have limits, this is what happens.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I want to make sure we still give our legislators time to talk, so we'll take one more question.
Actually, I've talked to Zach about this in the past, but I just so urge you. Oh, by the way, I'm Kathleen Johnson. I'm the director at Wildlife Assisted Living. but I just so urge you to stay on top of the technology at the state with DHS. Our background checks, and I'm not against a background check at all, I agree. But we do a national background check, but we are also required to do a state background check. I can get a national background check back within 24 hours. But if somebody has anything on their record, we just had one who had a misdemeanor from 1997, and it took 5 full days for us to get a response from the state of Iowa. That is hurtful, not only for the person, we cannot employ that person until it even comes back a second time from the state that says, yes, we can employ, or no, we cannot employ. And this isn't just me. This affects every care worker in an assisted living, in a nursing home, in a hospital, everywhere. And it all has to go through the state. And I'm not against that. It's just the technology. I get stopped, he's gonna know in 5 minutes or less, a minute or less, whether I've had anything on my background.
So we should just take his technology away and give it to DHS.
I don't say take it away, just use that same technology. It's just that we need it a little bit faster. I'm still waiting on someone that we actually initiated last Monday, and we still have not gotten anything back from her. So Monday it will be a full 7 full days. And I asked her about the applicant, and she said, well, she had done the deferred adjudication, and it really shouldn't be on her record. It still comes back. Like they said, this one misdemeanor in 1997, and we still have to get a second approval. It just, if it was faster, fine. Also, I'd like you to keep a real close check on Medicaid and elderly waiver, MCOs. Stay on top of them. We're just not getting paid as fast. Last week I got a check for November of 19.
It's a fiasco.
Yeah.
Can we start? Okay, so when it comes to Medicaid and getting payments, if you're having trouble, email them to me, and I'll work on it from my end. I have a pretty high success rate, but I can't make any promises, but those folks have people that stand out in the rotunda and wait for us to ask them questions. So just send them my way, and I'll work on them from my end. Yeah, it should not take 3 months to get paid. That's unrealistic. And that's unrealistic for hospitals, and that's unrealistic for nursing homes, or for private pay folks too. Getting bills 3 months late. Yeah, but everybody else seems to function on the monthly cycle, right? So we should be able to do that too. So yeah, just send those our way, and we'll work on them. And then when it comes to technology, and are you on a PROPS? Okay, so you probably know this a little bit better than me, but it sounds like there's a subcommittee that they created to kind of dig into this. That same issue is happening with the Department of Revenue, and we hear it every tax season. People are saying, well, I want my tax refund. My first point to them is, one, you don't want a refund. You want to cut it as close as possible, right? Because otherwise the government's using your money. But two, if you are so eagerly anticipating that refund, it's going to be delayed. It is, and it's going to be delayed weeks because they saved, in 1 year, I think they saved over $40 million because they double checked them to make sure that because people are filing false returns. And so in order to circumvent that identity theft, they're running extra technology protocols. But the Department of Revenue is running off of technology that is ancient. And so there's an interesting bill going around from the judicial branch where they want to get social security numbers from the Department of Revenue and take them to the judicial branch and mash them with their list, and then increase the size of the jury pool, and then also increase the accuracy of the jury pool. And this bill was chugging right along. I'm like, whoa, hold on. First of all, do we want more social security numbers on government databases? One. And two, can the Department of Revenue even do this? Turns out they can't, because their technology is so antiquated that they can't even send those numbers over to the judicial branch. So here we were, passing laws and, this making revolutionary changes, and it couldn't even get done because the technology just wasn't there. So we've worked on that bill. We're going to have a delayed effective date until 2023, and hopefully the Department of Revenue, we can get their technology updated before then, and get that in order, and then hopefully you're getting your tax returns in better time. But I mean, that whole thing copies over to the Department of Public Health or Department of Human Services. Their technology is antiquated and old, and they're still using fax machines. I mean, let's move on. It's time to upgrade that. So I look forward to what the appropriations subcommittee comes up with, how they figure out how we can start paying for that stuff. I think there are some plans in the works, and maybe Johnny, you could talk more about that, to fund like a continuing ongoing technology program, so that we don't ever come to this place where we have human services and revenue and all these other branches that all need technology now. So that's what I know. You guys have.
So a couple things, not to give Representative Jones more work, but she is much more effective at when you send these MCO payment concerns to her. They seem to get resolved a little quicker than when I send them in. So not to give you more work, but
that's okay.
Send them her way. Yeah, Kathleen, thanks for raising this issue. This is something that this is exactly what this is so perfect for. This is an issue I wouldn't have known about unless you talked to me about it, and talked to me about it, and talked to me about it again. We had a meeting down in Spencer with the Iowa Healthcare Association a couple months ago, and I offered to write that bill. The more effective approach is, I think they're working through the Human Resources Committee to do that, which is better. I mean, just you work with the committee and the chair of jurisdiction over that, rather than me just popping off some bill. But I was very committed to working on that, and many of the points that Representative Jones made are very true. We do have some antiquated technology in a lot of departments and agencies that need to be updated. DPS, DHS, and did you say is it the Judicial Branch and Revenue Bill? Is that the effective date we're delaying?
Yeah, there will be an amendment to that.
I was on that bill, so it helps me know where things are at with it. I was in that bill in the Senate. And then one thing we need to do is we need to work, to do some better integration with what's called the OCIO, the Office of the Chief Information Officer, and make sure that, as a statewide enterprise, that we're buying technology and solutions and as big and bulk a way as we can to save on costs, and to make sure that it's all workable and integrated within the framework and the technology there. So I think emerging issues, the biggest things that come down to funding. I don't. How much was the Craig Paulson ask for how much it would take to fix their computers?
I thought it was 50, but I also heard 100.
Yeah, and I was going to say 200 million, but that seems a little high. But anyways, I mean, if we're going to spend $100 million for one department to upgrade their technology, I think that shows you that across the whole scope of state government, it's going to cost a lot of money to upgrade that stuff. So any ways that we can work to integrate that across the whole enterprise of state government, I think only benefits the citizens that utilize these agencies.
I think it's 34 million over 3 years.
Okay.
I think that's, where is that? So 100 million.
Okay.
I think. A lot of numbers that happen in appropriations committees. So in answer to your question, I don't know that it's Office of Information. I don't know that it's the technology side of the state that's causing this. 5-6 years ago, my first bill that I passed out of the House was a bill called Asset Verification for Aged, Blind, and Disabled. It was a Medicaid bill that specifically went at aged, blind, and disabled folks and required the department to investigate using a high-tech computer system, investigate whether they were fraudulently accessing Medicaid. We passed that my first year, 6 years ago. Megan, when that was 2 years ago that they finally implemented, or if they finally came back.
It took them a very long time to get that done.
Almost 4 years to implement the rules, and they did not want to do it 6 years ago. They did not want to move into the technology that it would require. So my guess, without knowing a lot about this issue, is that it's the department. They don't want to move into those kind of things. They don't want to get into the modern era for whatever reason. I don't know why. But yes, their technology is atrocious. Their especially Department of Revenue, everything is old. Right now, the Department of Revenue's technology, this is the last year we can use it with technical support from the company who made it. If we don't move to something different and it goes down next year, maybe we all have tax-free holiday next year or something, but it's going to be bad. And so we're going to have to make this investment. But we shouldn't be in the situation where you're looking for background checks, where our Department of Revenue has to have this year a technology upgrade, and that's mismanagement and failure of our departments in the state of Iowa. And I can't put it any other way, and I would say we got to change in the state of Iowa. So as we get through this year, we have developed, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee has put together an information technology subcommittee as part of the Appropriations Committee, whose sole purpose is to look at information technology in the state of Iowa and then come back at the end of the year and make recommendations as to how we're going to move in the state of Iowa. I would guarantee there's going to be too much there that we're not going to be able to tackle it all this year, but at least we have a start and we have a way forward. I don't know if the Senate is doing, I don't know if they work together and if the Senate is doing the same thing or not, but that's the way we are, that's the way we're addressing it, and we're going to move forward. Hopefully next year we come here to Spirit Lake and we'll have a better, something better for you. And I think, I was also going to say on MCOs, ditto what Representative Jones said. If you've got an issue with the MCOs, I'd be happy to look at and address those issues as well, because we need to make sure that the folks that are getting paid by the MCOs are getting paid, and they're getting paid in a timely fashion.
And I'm not passing the buck off to either of them. You can also send those to me. You can send those to me.
All right, well, I appreciate the questions. Thanks everybody for the decorum. That helps everybody understand what's going on with the issues. We definitely appreciate your time. Take it out, and God knows what you got for the rest of the day, but maybe you can go out and enjoy the sun and the trails here in Spirit Lake.
I'm going to get my seatbelt fixed. That's important.
What riveting lives we
I know.
So you heard that.
This is a great day. Just everybody go out and enjoy it. Get outside. It's going to be wonderful.
Exactly.
It's in the back seat in the middle, so it's not the driver's
It's when he has the kids, though.
So we'll take just a couple of minutes and give each of our legislators just a couple of minutes for closing remarks, and then we'll
Well, just thank you all for being here. There's no shortage of interesting issues. Some things that didn't come up that I'm still working on. Daycare, big deal in our state. Daycare is very expensive, but it's also very hard to come by. So I have a bill that would exempt daycare providers from the state income tax. That would boost up their wages, but then also not put that wage increase on the backs of the working families. So I'm going to continue to work on that bill. Also, an issue that came out of this district relates to broadband. Our federal government is giving out broadband grants, but certain entities that have received them, that it's considered income. So the government is giving them money to do a task and then taking some of that back to the tune of like $800,000. And so it really hampers the amount of growth and expansion they can do when it comes to broadband. So we'll probably be moving to exempt those from income tax as well. And that was just a piece that came from the 2017 federal changes. But so not really fascinating or interesting issues, but certainly things that need to be fixed, right? So sometimes the devil's in the details, and some of those little bills become a big deal when it comes to working families and getting greater access to the internet. So thank you all for your questions and for being here today. Turn it over to Zach.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and yeah, it's not one of our kids' seatbelts, thankfully. I didn't know seatbelts could break, and mine did. Thank you guys for hosting this, Iowa Lakes, for stepping in and on short notice doing this. We have a great relationship and know a lot about the issues that are there, and you know, as we look at it, and hopefully this isn't too philosophical of a question, but why do we educate people? to help them, to give them a lifelong ability to learn and be curious. And but one of the big shifts that I've seen lately is how do we prepare people for the workforce and to go out into the real world. And our community colleges do a great job of filling where there are identified needs within the community. I think I'm very hopeful that our K-12s, our community colleges, and our workforces are working together to address those needs. And this is the chart. Every time I see this, that makes me sad. This is the per pupil funding that we give to Regents, K-12s, private colleges, and community colleges. The biggest return on investment, the biggest bang for your buck, in some of the numbers I've seen, you get out of a community college education. And everybody at all levels, K-12 and our Regents and private schools do a great job educating people. But you get a great return on your investment from a Iowa community college education. People stay here, they raise their families here, they work and fill those workforce needs. And so if there's any way that we can work to address that and close that disparity, every time I see that graph, it makes me sick. It really does. I don't know what to do about it, and if I did, I'd probably be making more money doing something else. But that's something I want to work on. So thank you guys for what you do for us and for everyone being here. Great questions.
I know what to do about it. So this is an issue that we have to deal with in the State House and specifically in appropriations. This year, this summer, we found out that the University of Iowa, and if you like the University of Iowa, I'm not bashing the University of Iowa, but the University of Iowa decided to lease out state-owned property to a foreign company for $1 billion. $1 billion over 50 years. They expect to pay maintenance fees of about $450 million over that 50 years. They expect to get $15 million a year, or $300 million back out of that property. $15 million a year as fees I should say that as interest on the $1 billion that they're going to put into a fund, a money market fund. They're going to get $15 million a year after leasing out state-owned property. And so we brought them into the State Appropriations Committee and said, do you think this is right that you rented out, you're leasing out state-owned property, you're going to get $15 million a year, and how much of that is going to go to tuition decreases? Well, none. How much of that is going to go to student improvement? None. How much of that is going to go to teachers and professors' increase of pay? Well, we have to increase teachers' pay to stay competitive in the state, in the Midwest. So in effect, $15 million of new money that's not appropriated by the state legislature is going to go to teachers' pay and other stuff that I won't go into. So my proposal would be we take $15 million out of the University of Iowa's revenue income from the state of Iowa, and we can increase the per pupil funding to community colleges. So there we go. There's one option. See? I don't know if it would get you there, but it would get you at least to the private colleges, I would bet.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time and for sharing with us this afternoon. Thanks for the great questions, and we really appreciate you being here at Iowa Lakes.
Thank you.